What's going on YouTube? So today we're going to be talking about the ultimate Pinguicula care guide. So yeah, let's get right to it. So we're going to be talking about soil, temperature, how to propagate them, maybe some care tips, but I'm going to put it all into one big screen picture right here, somewhere here. But I'm gonna go into details and I'm gonna make it into like chapters so you guys can see if you guys need more information on what you can do to check it if you're doing it right with your Pinguiculas. So yeah, let's get right to it. Let's begin with soiling requirements. Right now I have them in long fibered sphagnum moss, and it's all preference. It's all depending on the frequency and how you want to water them. As long as the soil doesn't have any nutrients in them, you will be definitely good with them. I've heard people, and I know people use peat and perlite. That's what I use with my cephalotus, just peat and perlite. And peat and perlite mix works. It's like a 50-50 peat and perlite. Or you can do also peat, like 50% peat, 25% sand, and 25% perlite. With the sand, make sure it doesn't have like too much salt in them. You have to like wash them down with like distilled water. So usually what I know that people use is silica sand, and they usually wash it first before they mix it in with the peat and perlite. I've also heard people mixing like a little bit of sphagnum and peat and then perlite or something like that, but it's all preference on how you want to water them. Also with like potting, I'm gonna include it in the soil. I highly recommend you don't use anything clear, because as the water travels up and you introduce it to light, I highly do not recommend clear cups, just because algae will grow in them, just like that. And right now I'm definitely going to be potting them in a different pot soon. You just have to order them. But yeah, I highly recommend like pots like that are closed and that light can't travel into them, so you don't have algae growing or whatever. But it's not gonna affect them in any other way. It's not even gonna harm them. It's just it doesn't look appealing, You can even see like random small things growing. But yeah, that's the thing with soil and potting. So yeah, also forgot to add with the soil and potting, their roots do not grow like super long. It's like super small, but just enough to where it can touch the ground in the soil. So it's not a big problem as long as they can touch the soil. So when you receive them, always just like lightly press them down. Like press them down, you'll feel it. It's like just the right amount when you're potting them. Make sure that the roots are in contact with the soil. But regardless, they will grow out their soil until you get them. And they will look for the water, where it's like a little bit moist, but not too moist. Some species of Pinguiculas, like the Primuliflora, they like it super wet compared to the regular Mexican Pinguiculas. So yeah. So let's talk about lights. So for the lights, I usually keep mine mostly all indoors, and I only have one Pinguicula in the windowsill right now. And if you're gonna keep them outside, I recommend, like on the full blast heat, I recommend that you acclimate them like a few days at a time, to where you leave them there for 2 to 3 hours, and then the next day you can leave it for 2 to 4 hours, to where it can acclimate to the temperature and lighting that you're giving them. So for lighting, I recommend using this Lux Meter app. It's on Android right now in the Play Store. I'm not sure if there's a similar thing in iPhone, but as you can see, it shows the maximum and the average. So what you're looking for is you're gonna calculate this lux that you're receiving right now from the light, and then you're gonna divide it by 65 to 70, and then you're gonna get the amount that your Pinguicula needs, which is around 100 to 400. I'm gonna post it up on the screen here somewhere, and that's how you calculate the PAR or PPFAD, which I forgot the exact acronym, but it's the photo period that your Pinguicula requires and the certain amount that they need to grow. For lights, I recommend that what I'm using right now is the VPAR Spectra 1000, and I have it at 50% right now, and it feels very warm, like it feels like the sun. You don't want to blast it all the way to 100% if you're using like certain amounts of, you know, light. You have to like acclimate them slowly. And then I also have some T5 Barinas here, which is basically like hanging lights, and I just have them just in case there are certain spots that my light doesn't hit my Pinguiculas. That's pretty much it with the light. You can leave your Pinguiculas in the windowsill, especially, you know, right now it's winter in my area, but in the summer you can usually leave them outside as long as you acclimate them slowly, and as long as it's not like direct sunlight the whole day. As long as they get shade from time to time, they'll be good. So for lights, I recommend around 14 to 16 hours if it's grown indoors, and then for outdoors I recommend at least like around 4 to 6 hours of direct sunlight. Depending on your location, you have to look more up of your specific Pinguicula that you have, acclimate them nearest to where they're usually found. That would be the best way to take care of them. But yeah, so for watering, usually I leave them in a tray of water. Usually I leave my Pinguiculas in a tray of water around, depending if it's winter or summer. So if it's like winter, usually I leave like less than like half an inch is where I usually leave the water, and then I have a watering schedule of 2 times a week. I usually check if the soil or sphagnum moss is moist, and then I usually, oh no, 1 second, you see those algae? Yeah, so that's why I recommend that the pots are not clear like this. But anyways, I usually touch if it's moist on the top, and if it's like a little bit moist, but not too moist, I just leave it be. But if usually they drink all of the half an inch of water, I add more, like an inch or so, and it's all depending on how big your pot is, and different pot size that you use requires different amounts of water. So, and also different types of soil can add to how much like water that you're gonna give to them. As you can see, there's still a little bit water left on that one. So far it'll be good. It'll be good for a couple of days. But certain Pinguiculas require more water, like this Primula Flora likes to be drenched in water. So what I usually do is like I spray it more with water, and then usually I just drip down more water on the side here. And right now you can see this one's flowering, so, but yeah, You don't want your Pinguiculas like super drenched in water, just enough for them to absorb it in their small root system, and they'll appreciate that. And usually, so I water mine twice a week. You can also water them once a week, but you have to add a little bit more water. But just be careful for root rots when you leave them in a lot of water. You just have to water them like at least like an inch to half an inch, depending if they soak it up real fast. But yeah, so far that's pretty much for watering. So I'm going to talk about temperature and humidity real quick. So my best answer to this is, sorry, I have to grab them back here. So my best answer to humidity and temperature is, if you can wear a shirt without feeling super cold in the room, then you're fine. They'll be fine. As long as the room temperature is at least like 50 to like, 60, and it's not like super cold to where they're gonna be like freezing, then they'll be fine. Mexican Pinguiculas can experience like heats up to like 80, depending on which type of Pinguicula is, and if they're hybrids. Usually it's not like a super big deal, as long as it's not like you're leaving them out in the cold, unless it's one of those Pinguiculas that require dormancy. But those Pinguiculas also require like a certain amount of cold, not to where it's gonna like give them like a cold snap. But yeah, so that's pretty much it with like Pinguiculas, with like temperature and humidity. Let's talk about propagating. So you got your Pinguicula, they look amazing. Like they come in, like when they first arrive, they look great. They look like in amazing condition, and you want them to live forever. Well, sadly, they don't live forever. But what you can do is do leaf pullings, or sometimes they would create like a certain what would be this? So this is the growth point, like the middle leaf right there. Sometimes they would double that growth point to where they would split. The Pinguicula would literally split into two different Pinguiculas, and those times you can like split them up, so you have basically two Pinguiculas. But that's not always the case, so the best option would be to propagate them by leaf pullings. And right now I will show you how to do it, but you don't have to do it all the time. But it would be nice if you do it like at least 2 to 3 leaf pullings, just so you have higher chances of making a new Pinguicula. So I will demonstrate it right here. Okay, so we're back under the desk. So you got your Pinguicula here, and what I recommend is you literally grab a leaf, and it doesn't matter which type of Pinguicula, except for I think the Snow Queen Pinguicula. That one requires to where it has to separate, and that's the one where it has to have 2 growth points and it just splits. But other than that, most, like all Pinguiculas that I know of, will require you to do leaf propagations to make more of them. So what I recommend is you hold down your Pinguicula softly, and you literally just nudge on the leaf, and then you pull it, and then what is that? Let me see. You see that it's gonna look like very white in the tip there, but this one I think it's like brownish. But usually you want to grab the leaf that's like the newest leaves, and you want to see like a little bit of white on top. So I'm just gonna do 1 leaf pulling on this one. Oh, it's not showing. like one leaf pulling on this one, grabbing, you know, like a takeout tray, and just put one of the leaf pullings, like, and just set it down. And this would apply to every Pinguicula. And let me do one more example so you guys can see. So you got your Pinguicula here, and just hold it down, and then you nudge left and right, and then as much as possible you grab a little bit more to the leaf, and then you just nudge, and then it pulls right up. And then see that white tip right there? That's what you're looking for. You literally just set it down. You set it down and you forget about it. Usually it takes like a month or so until you see some new growth points. I want to point out, like, this is from Pinguicula. There's a little bit over there. Those are like small leaves, I think, at some point. And now for flowering. Since I don't have any flowers at the moment with my Pinguicula, and this one's like still growing, the Pinguicula, and I think this one's a little bit failed, but this is my Pinguicula Guatemala. I think the flower's like not gonna happen because it looks like it's a little bit dying, I think. So maybe it will try again or something like that. But for flowering, you can, if you have two Pinguiculas, you can pollinate them. But if you only have one Pinguicula and it's flowering, I recommend you cut it once it reaches like a certain point in the top, and you cut it as closest to the base. Because what flowering does is it uses energy of the Pinguicula instead of making new leaves, and it just slows down their growth. Unless you cut the flower stalk, and they will exert more of their energy towards making new leaves. So unless you have two Pinguiculas, there's no point if you just have like one Pinguicula that's flowering. So also you can like hybridize if you have like two different species of Pinguiculas. You just have to look up like if they're Mexican Pinguiculas or if they're like South American Pinguiculas. So you have to be careful with that, because sometimes it may work, sometimes it may not. It's up to you to try. So with like when they flower, what I recommend is grabbing a paintbrush and you stick it into the hole of the flower and you brush it a little bit, and then you grab that pollen to the other Pinguicula of their other flower stalk. And then basically that's pretty much it with cross-pollinating Pinguiculas. You just have to get the other pollen to the other Pinguicula. And now for dormancy. So basically most Mexican Pinguiculas don't require dormancy. So congratulations, you picked the better Pinguicula. But don't be alarmed. Certain other Pinguiculas do require dormancy, and I'm not sure which type they are or where they're originally found, but it's usually in colder climates. But in colder winter temperatures, usually some Pinguiculas, they go from super carnivorous phase to where they make a lot of dewy sap. They don't make a lot of dewy sap. That's because it's winter time to where they're just slowing down and they're figuring out like, wow, it's a little bit colder. So don't be alarmed if your Pinguicula is not making a lot of the saps that you usually see. So usually some Pinguiculas, they kind of bunch up into a little bit like a rosette, or some Pinguiculas, they display like certain different colors or characteristics. My Pinguicula LRC. Apparently I thought it just needed light, but this is what it looks like in winter time. It's gonna bundle up into like a rosette. You see how like all the leaves are forming really tight, that it's kind of winter dormancy, but it really doesn't need like colder temperatures or shorter photo period of light. So right now it's just, that's how it is in winter, you know. Some other Pinguiculas display a different trait. An example would be my primuliflora. Usually it makes like wide leaves, but in the winter it's gonna make like a starfish leaf. So it all depends on the different type of Pinguicula you have. Some will show characteristics of it, some will not. But usually in winter, or in, you know, their dormancy state, they won't produce a lot of the dewy sap in front of their leaves. So I mean, they will produce some, but it won't be a lot. They will still attract prey, like that unfortunate one, but most of the time they won't. It'll be less compared to the summertime. But yeah, that's pretty much it with their dormancy, you know. And last but not least, fertilizer. What do you use for fertilizer? Fertilizer is not required, but it's like more of like an optional, unless you want to see them like bloom really hard. Usually in the wild, their fertilizer is the insects, just because they need the nitrogen that they're not getting from their roots, just because they live in nutrient poor condition, you know, climates. So if you don't have any bugs or fungus gnats in your area or in your home, what I recommend is Maxi, or what is that called? The cactus or succulent, you know, spray thing, like fertilizer for cactuses. Those will work too. So what would you do is like, you grab a spray bottle and you mix like a few drops, like 1 to 3 drops, depending on, you know, how much you want to do. But you can mix that with like the spray bottle and fill it with distilled water, and you shake it up real good and just spray their leaves. So I've never done that, just because I keep like insects myself. Like I have like small dubia roaches and mealworms that I could feed them, or sometimes I have like fungus gnats here, and that won't be a problem with me. So, but if you have like problems like that, you can always leave them outdoors too in like the summertime, and they would get their fertilizer from there. Like I'd assume there'd be like 1 or 2 fungus gnats, but they really don't need fertilizers. But it's like an optional, and it would be best if you do like, you know, the Maxi or the succulent one, the succulent fertilizer mixed with distilled water in a spray bottle. I'd recommend using that for at least just every 2 to 1 month. You don't have to do it like every week, just because they don't require a lot of fertilizer and they don't require much. But yeah, there's a bonus thing. What you can also do, before I end this video, what you can also do is you can put Pinguiculas in a bog garden. A bog garden is basically like a big giant pot with like soil in it, and you can mix it with like Sarracenia, like trumpet pitchers, or you can mix them with like Venus flytraps. But you have to make sure that they all have like the same requirements. With like, you know, like Venus flytraps require dormancy, whereas some Pinguiculas don't, you know. So you can do that. You can mix them. I've seen people do that, especially with, I think, like pitcher plants. No, I'm not sure. I don't think it's pitcher plants, but there's certain Drosera. You can mix them with Drosera in a bog garden, just because Drosera loves being in the sun and it loves being drenched in water, but not to where it's drowning. Same thing with Pinguiculas, but they don't like it like to where they're drowning in water, just enough so they don't have like root rot. But yeah, that's just one other tip and idea. You can also put them in an amazing terrarium. to where the humidity is like all the way through the roof. And they love humidity, but not that much. You know, it's not like super requirement. If you're comfortable, they're comfortable. But yeah, that's one other tip I can give you guys. So if you guys like this video, you guys can comment down on what I can do better for my next video. And I definitely appreciate you guys watching this. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.